When you boot up Touhou 7, you're greeted with a title screen covered in blue hues. The song that plays is the most serene of any Touhou title so far. Reimu stands in the center, closing her eyes, as if she's entranced by the song. This helps set the game's mood. From the menu screen, Touhou 7 has done its first bit of storytelling. When trying to tell a story in games, it's important for a developer to consider their game's genre. A lot of expositional text might work out fine in a JRPG, but might not in an action platformer. Touhou has a unique challenge when it tells its stories. It's an arcade shmup designed for players to attempt over and over again. If dialogue were too long in this type of game, players who game over and get to that dialogue again will just remember it's long and not want to reread it. So, what do you do to fill in the gaps? Well, with the menu example, we've already demonstrated part of Touhou's technique. Touhou storytells subtly. Even before you start the game, you can scroll the character select screen to something different. Reimu's wearing longer sleeves, Marissa's got a warmer outfit, and the newly playable Sakuya has a winter scarf. And a short dress? Huh. It seems like the characters are geared up for the cold, and Sakuya's weirdness gets emphasized early. Touhou character designs tend to change slightly with each game, and here, they help establish the initial winter setting of Touhou 7. When the game starts, we see something unique to Touhou 7, a little poem. These poems come at the start of each level. Cherry petals should have fallen like snowflakes, yet it was still silver with snow. This alludes to the game's incident. Spring is supposed to come, but it's still winter. The poem gives Touhou 7 a more unique identity. It's not just another Touhou 6. Further distinguishing the game, the first stage theme opens with a traditional Japanese string instrument. After a Western inversion from Touhou 6, we're thrown into an Eastern story and an Eastern project. And yet, a lingering sense of familiarity still remains within Cherno's entrance. She had ice powers in the last game, so her being here makes sense. This, Sakuya, and an upcoming character make it clear that Touhou 7 is building off what came before, rather than starting fresh. Music continues to help set the game's mood, with the song being a bit slow, yet upbeat. When we get to Letty, we learn the incident proper. The characters have seeked her out since she can manipulate winter. I talked before about how long dialogue can distract from a game's pacing, especially in a game this fast. So, Touhou's dialogue is often snappy, and to the point with its meaning. For Letty, we learn that winter's going on longer than it normally does, the protagonist accuses Letty of doing the incident, there's some wrestling-style trash talk, and then a fight happens. The player does not have to remember much, so the dialogue can be rushed through the next time if they wish. I won't talk about this for every boss since that distracts a bit from the broad points, but characteristics are often communicated through gameplay. Letty's dramatic theme brings up the energy considerably. Her blue bullets match her winter theming. She also has a card reminiscent of a snowflake, matching her identity of a winter spirit. We don't have to read about how cool, haha get it, she is. We just get to actually experience it. Like the Touhou games before, 7 continues to characterize through its fights. The game also features something a bit unique. Touhou 6 did not feature a visible hitbox for characters. This game does, and patterns can be made more dense because of it. So, Letty's snowflake pattern looks a lot harder than any of Rumiya's, but the visible hitbox means the difficulty is actually fairly similar. Touhou 7 is able to build a sense of scale compared to Touhou 6 without actually increasing the difficulty. Stage 2 doesn't do too much dramatically different from Stage 1, but it does feature something important. In Touhou 6, we're told about a red mist, but don't really see it in some of the stages. So, Stage 2 in that game feels like a bit of a jump. In Stage 2 of Touhou 7, we're still met with similar music, some mist, and even snowflakes. The winter still continues. In this way, Touhou's world feels a bit more connected. We really get to see how this extended winter is affecting all of Gensokyo, and not just Stage 1. When we reach Chen, we get some threats about never being able to leave, and retorts from our protagonists like, "The Buddhist paradise is warm," they say. Chen's general confidence, contrasted by her early placement, helps establish her as a sillier character. There's also more to her than first glance, but that's a story for another time. In Stage 3, Zune had an interesting conundrum. He wanted to reintroduce a character from the older games who's important to the series, but aside from one silly line, there's no reference to her being any more special than the previous bosses you fought. How do you make it clear she's special without heavy exposition? Well, the solution here was pacing. In Touhou, you normally fight either a series of mid-bosses and a boss, or you fight the boss as a mid-boss and then them again. Alice is the first character in the series you fight 3 times in one stage. She keeps attacking as a mid-boss, not only establishing her as a special character, but also giving the stage itself some uniqueness. For players who did play Touhou 5, this is a great reintroduction to Makai's extra boss. For players who didn't play, they're instead introduced intriguingly to a new face. Alice's dialogue also establishes that she's mellowed out since Touhou 5. Compared to the trash talk of before, she's just looking for a duel. I've talked extensively about Stage 4 in a previous video, so I'll be briefer here. This stage does a wonderful job building up tension, with its length and increased difficulty serving well as a transition to the back half of the game. Importantly, this stage sees the player leaving the ground and taking to the sky. In moving from ground to sky, the player can feel real progress through the game. Touhou 7 doesn't have rooms of a mansion as a framing device, so instead, we have the sky and the seasons. We do move a bit closer to spring, with us even meeting a spring fairy. We also get to meet the Prism River sisters. Each character gets to fight a different sister, which also brings up something Touhou does. It's an arcade-style game that encourages replayability, and this helps. Each sister will give different information. Importantly, the player is never lost with the game's plot. There are some major info snippets you can miss out on, which I will get to later, but it never distracts from the game's tension. Stage 4 might be the most well-known stage in the game, but I think 5 does a brilliant job with its atmosphere. After the swarms of enemies from the chaotic sky, the Netherworld is comparatively more peaceful. The song opens similarly to End of Daylight from Touhou 2. You're entering a new world, and the music helps signify this. The Netherworld is serene. The stage also ditches the snowflake effects for full cherry petals. You're out of winter now. This is spring. You're getting closer. It's also a very long flight of stairs, like you're climbing towards something unthinkable. And then, we get to Yomu. Sakuya in Touhou 6 left an impression because she was a bit aloof. She cracked a few jokes here and there, and yet still felt devoted to her job. So, how do you set the next Stage 5 boss apart? You play her completely straight. Yomu exudes a sense of loyalty people imagine from a bodyguard. She openly declares that she will defeat you. In a world where characters make wrestling threats and don't take things too seriously, Yomu is a pretty sudden change of pace. The way she bounces out the cast is also pretty different. There's no witty banter, she just says things as they are. She's focused on her mission, and this is of course contrasted by the fact that even with Zune's art, she's adorable. We also get her iconic line, "The things that cannot be cut by my Rokanken, forged by yokai, are next to none!" Stage 6. We have that frantic song playing, as if the end of the world is approaching. The sky is an ominous shade, signaling that the finale has come. I've talked about this in a different video too, but we also get a defining Yomu moment. She's hurt badly from the previous fight, but she's willing to stand up against the player for her master's sake. Sakuya did this too, but Yomu does it with a certain level of desperation that lands with the players harder. But you beat Yomu, and Yuyuko. I've talked at length about how less dialogue is often used to keep the game's pacing on track. Here though, that rule is slightly broken. The players made it through a 30-minute bullet hell adventure, so a little breathing room with longer dialogue is fine. But the dialogue itself still isn't too long. Yuyuko explains in all roots that the tree needs to bloom with the spring that's been stolen. The player's been collecting spring throughout the game as a gameplay mechanic. We now know how that spring ended up being scattered. But only in Reimu's route do we get to learn that reviving the tree will also revive someone. Reimu is a guardian of Gensokyo, so she gets a bit more motivation. While the other characters simply want Gensokyo's spring back, Reimu needs to ensure the tree's revival doesn't cause major consequences. She gets extra stakes. Yuyuko's fight pairs with Border of Life, one of the most powerful songs in the series. The use of spring colors, flower-like bullets, and expanding attacks help give this fight a true sense of beauty. It's as if you're fighting through a dance. This goes on, and the player enters a surprisingly easy final spell. Then that's done, and we get a poem like the ones that open the stages. One final one before the end. Border of Life 2 fades in. Resurrection Butterfly starts. This is the culmination of all the spring that's been stolen, and all of the spring the players gathered. It's a final fight for the balance of Gensokyo. You can feel the importance of this last rush. The silhouetted Yuyuko with the tree also leaves a sense of intrigue. The spell itself is the most visually stunning in the entire game, and gameplay-wise it's no walk in the park either. You could lose a run to this, but you survive the final rush, and there are endings to this game that I'm unfortunately not allowed to show. Each show off something about the character you won with, such as Sakuya's devotion to her master, or Marissa freeloading in the Netherworld. Here, they serve as nice palate cleansers after an intense battle. With those endings done, so ends Touhou 7. This was not really a plot summary of Touhou 7. It was instead a rhetorical analysis of what Touhou 7 does in the video game medium to tell its story, through its use of environments, framing devices, gameplay integration, and mostly brief dialogue. Touhou 7's able to tell an effective story in a genre that otherwise seems challenging to do so in. For players who do want more context, the remake of this game provides more information, such as a direct answer as to what exactly was under that tree. Keeping this information out of the actual game allows for the game's pacing to stay on track. Everything mentioned in this video was not new to Touhou per se, but I think at the time, 7 was the best Touhou game in terms of how the story was told. It's a remarkable balancing act between plot and gameplay that served as a structural basis for 2 decades of Touhou game stories that came later. There is something a little extra I didn't cover, but as I said before, that will be a story for another time. But for now, this is how Touhou 7 tells its story. Happy PC birthday.